Hello and welcome to my tutorial about converting Ortho4XP tiles. I had probably close to 1,000 Ortho4XP tiles for the United States that were created originally in version 1.20b, and I did find some features that I really liked in version 1.30. So the question is, what do I do? Basically rerun all the tiles and build new imagery? Well, that might sound appealing in a way because one might think, well, they must have new images that would look even better than what they had a few years ago. But unfortunately, I found that not to be true. So let me just give you a quick reason of why you might want to use your original imagery. Now, that's one of the big things about this tutorial is how to build tiles with your original imagery, even if you don't have the JPEGs. You might say, well, I didn't keep those JPEGs. It took up too much hard drive space. So there's a way to do it with the original images, even when you have multiple zoom level tiles like I do, and it will not download new images on top of them, which is cool. And the reason why we don't want to do that is two reasons. Number one, Bing, I think, has gone softer in the United States. It's not as sharp as it used to be in zoom level 17. And Google is doing this weird thing that, since they're not really interested in us flight simmers, they want to provide average users a 3D experience. So you're seeing in a lot of populated areas like cities, when you start to zoom in on Google Maps, that you might see the original sort of normal looking imagery. Let's see if I zoom in here. That looks like a regular two-dimensional image. Hasn't been doctored in any way. It's just nice and sharp, and you can zoom in real close. That's the appeal of Google Imagery, is that there's zoom level 19 and 18 and 17 are true zoom level 19, 18, and 17. And that looks nice and sharp, right? Okay. However, it's a little bit of a more rural area, if you want to call it that. But let's say the area in and around Louisville, which is what we're going to focus on today, a tile that has Louisville in it. Watch what happens when I get closer to it. They are going with this sort of weird saturated image that might look cool when you want to do it as like a three-dimensional image, and they really want all these colors to pop. Personally, I don't really like it at all. But look what happens now. Do you really want to build tiles to fly over that look like, I don't know, that looks more like some weird broccoli instead of trees, right? So could you imagine throwing out your tiles to start new, and then you end up with areas that look like this? Good news is we can avoid having to re-download imagery. So what we do is we're going to need a couple of tools first. At least is the way I do it. Somebody might know a better way. One thing you're going to want is Notepad++. If you don't already have it, it's a free download. The best way I can explain it is that if you have to copy paste any text that applies from one tile to the next, it's going to put it in the correct format when you use Notepad++. That's the way it's been explained to me. I am not a programmer. Code makes me scared. So when you see me doing stuff with text and copying and pasting it and, you know, some very basic steps here, trust me, I would be just as nervous as you might if you're like, dude, I don't do any kind of coding stuff. The other thing you want to download is Python. Okay, so when you download Python, you can go to the download section. I'm doing this under Windows, so I just click on this. Download the installer. You can run it as basic. It'll install what you need. Okay, and then you have your two basic tools that we're going to need for this procedure. So this procedure is just a series of steps, and that's all it is. It's repetitive, it's straightforward, it just looks a little weird, and it looks a little numerous in this tutorial, but it goes pretty quick once you get it down. Okay, so once you have those two things installed, what I recommend is you can pin the apps to your taskbar because you're going to use them frequently. The other thing you're going to want to do is bring up a command prompt. And again, that's something that made me nervous when I first did that because I'm like, whoa, that sounds like coding to me. And I don't do any coding, right? So you bring this up, and then once it's in your taskbar, which it already is here for me, just right-click it and pin it to your taskbar. And I basically put now all these three tools that I use when I convert tiles. You know, since it's going to take a while, you might have to do this over a series of days, or as you might have, I was just doing it in my spare time. I didn't do all my tiles at once, okay? Cool. All right, so we'll come back to that in a moment. So let's have a look at a tile that was originally created in version 1.20. So I'm going to go in to Ortho4XP 1.30, and I've moved the tiles I want to play around with today in my tiles folder. And we're going to do the tile that has Louisville Airport in it, which is 3886. All right, 3886. So we're going to go over there and find that tile. And the reason why I'm going in there first is just to show you what the Ortho4XP 1.2 version would have looked like. It would have had these files in it. Okay, it has a config file, has a mesh file probably, and a bunch of stuff in here. Okay. So what we need to do is, there's files missing here that would have been created under Ortho4XP 1.3, so we're going to make that all happen. So the first we're going to do is launch Ortho4XP version 1.3. Now I like to arrange my windows in such a way that will allow me to sort of like easily find them and click them, because you end up with a bunch of windows open and they're all overlapping each other. We said that was 3886. So we're going to type that in, 38, and it's technically minus 86. Okay, so it's already in there. And then the next thing I need to do is make the changes in the config menu. So we're going to click on that toolbar, that tool icon, right? And what we're going to do now is I want Ortho4XP to read the old config file, okay? And it will do that for you, right? So if we go back over here, when I click on the load tile config, it's going to read this file. Because it doesn't have the new version to read, it's smart enough to say, well, let me read the old one since I don't see a new one in here. You're going to see a new one pop up in a minute. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click load tile config. Boom. Okay. And if you notice, when you do it, not much happens, right? You might have saw in your peripheral vision a few numbers change. And what it did was it read this file. So that's good. Okay, let me just sort of move this down over here for now. I don't know, it doesn't really matter. I just want to be able to see up here. Now, you don't have to change the imagery source, because what it's going to do is it's going to automatically read it. Like, in other words, watch this. If I had this under Bing, okay, and then I go back over here and I click on load tile config again, it automatically switches it, because that's what was in this file. So you don't have to go changing that when working with the old tiles. It's going to do it for you. Now that I have that loaded in there, what we're going to do is make a few changes. So I personally made, some things that I like better. All right. Since I'm doing the United States, what I like to do is do the high resolution 1/3 arc second. So I'm going to do that. But if you're outside the United States, this might not be available to you. In fact, it won't. You might have to use something else. Overpass server choice, I switch this to DE. If your step 1 stops and doesn't do anything, switching this to DE will help. Then what I'm going to do is the mask width, the ratio has changed. It used to be like a 10:1 ratio. This is in meters. I find that with Google Source. So 100 was times 10, 1,000 meters, or basically 3,000, over 3,000 feet. I'm just going to put in 1,000 for the Google Source. This would really be applicable if you were doing coastline tiles. But anyway, I just like to keep it consistent. Then I'm going to change. Now, I usually would build my old tiles, or if I built a brand new tile, I'd put true for high zoom level around airports. However, I've done some custom stuff in some of my tiles, so I'm going to switch this to false. And the reason why I'm doing that is I don't want it to overlay some new interpreted high zoom level squares. That might cause it to download some new imagery. Even though my tiles already have the 5-mile parameters around some of the airports, because they already have it, I don't need this to be on. So I just turn it to false to make sure nothing happens. Here's another big one that I made a separate video about, and I will link below. By default, Ortho4XP 1.2, I believe, put the normal map strength at 0.3. I now put it to 1.0. And what having it at 0.3 did was that in the evening, when the sun got low, the tiles would be very dark and the mountains wouldn't have that golden hour glow to them when the sun got real low. But putting it to 1.0 fixes that. So this is one I strongly recommend. Okay. And that's it for now. I have everything I need, right, that I like. I did a few other things that will explain potentially another video if you guys want to. This video is going to get long enough as it is, so we'll just go past that. So the key thing after you have everything that you want in here is that you're going to hit the apply button. And we're not going to see anything change. The only thing that's going to happen, what I do like in Ortho4XP 1.30, is that when you click on a button, it outlines it for you, saying, yes, you did actually click it. Okay, cool. Now that I hit apply, we still don't see any changes here. Well, now I have everything that I need. I need to write the new configuration. So I'm going to click on this, and you're going to see it appear here. Watch this. Write tile config, and there it is. Cool. Excellent. Okay. Now, here's the next step. What we need to do is get the custom zoom level stuff that I had from the old tile into the new tile. So this is where we're going to need to copy paste some text. And like I told you before, I personally, when I see anything that looks like code or text to me, I get a little nervous. But if you just follow these steps, it should work out fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click this. It's going to open up in Notepad. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and I'm going to see all of these weird looking coordinates. Now the problem with the way this format is we essentially need all of this stuff in the brackets in the new version of the config file. But you might think, well, let me just copy paste it in there. It's not in the right format. So that's what Python's going to take care of for us. So I'm going to just, including the zone list, I'm going to click here, okay, and I'm going to highlight this whole thing, and I'm going to drag it until we get to the end, and then that's it. I'm going to let go, and you could right click and copy, or I'm going to do Control C for copy. All right, cool. Now I need to go to my command prompt. Okay, so I had it saved down here. I'm going to launch it. And the first step for each session you do, you only have to type in, you have to launch Python through here. You just got to do that once, and then you can continue to do the next steps without relaunching Python. So I'm going to type in the word Python. I could try to explain this to you, but I have no idea how. So I'm just, as far as like what this is actually doing. But I typed in the word Python, I hit enter, and it looks like it sort of launched, I guess. Somebody might be able to chime in and give you better detail than me. And now what I'm going to do is paste in the stuff I just copied out of the config file. Now, right-clicking and pasting doesn't work here, so I'm going to do Control V for paste. Okay, and we get all of this, right? Including that original zone list brackets and all this. I'm going to drag this down a little bit to make the window bigger, to make it easier to work with. So there it is, and now I'm just going to hit the Enter key. I am going to type in the word. I accidentally hit enter with nothing there, so that's why there's this extra space. You don't need that. I'm going to just type the words zone list with an underscore. ZONE underscore list. Okay. Now, I'm making this work. I don't even know what it's doing, but it works. I'm going to now hit the enter key again. And what it did was it took all of this stuff and it put it all together in these brackets. So all of this stuff is now located in these triple brackets and these double brackets in the correct format. Maybe somebody here knows how to just do it themselves. I sure as heck don't want to have to type that all out in a different format. Now I'm just going to click and drag and highlight it all. Okay, so we have it all in there. And since right clicking and copying won't work, I'm just going to hit Control C. That's normal that it disappeared like that. Okay, cool. And then what we need to do is go back to the window that has these config files. We already used this one, and we're going to take this stuff that we copied and we're going to put it in this one. Okay, so down at the bottom it does say zone list. Okay, and it has its own brackets already. Personally, what I like to do is just highlight the two brackets because I'm going to paste it on top of that, and it will work. All right, so I'm going to hit Control V. Now, the way my notepad is configured right now, for some reason it puts it all in one line. There might be like a wraparound option. I haven't bothered playing with it. But basically now everything is in these brackets in the correct format, and it's going to work. All the other information here is from the modifications we made here. I'm going to now save it. In Notepad, if this is colorful, that means you didn't save it yet. So I'm going to click it. Now it's grayed out. I know I saved it. I'm going to X out of it. Don't need it anymore. Okay. We'll have it for the next one. Cool. All right. Now here's the next step. Again, this is just a series of steps you got to follow. We're going to come in here, and I'm going to load it again. But now when I click on load, it's going to, instead of loading what was in here, it's going to now load this one into the software. And again, when I load it, I'm not going to see many changes at all. You might see some numbers change in your peripheral vision, but watch. We're going to hit load. Boom. I know I clicked load because it's in outline, but nothing changed. But I know it's now in the software. Now that it's loaded, we need it to actually apply. So I'm going to click the apply button. Apply. Again, we didn't see much happen. Here's where we're now going to confirm that everything worked. I want to make sure that my custom zoom level parameters actually transferred over. So we're going to click on here. I'm going to click on preview. I'm going to go full screen. And notice what happened. By the way, all those coordinates that we copied are defining the zoom level 19 areas and 18 areas that you might have done yourself. So you can see some of them are like perfectly straight lines. Those are the ones that Ortho4XP originally drew. And then I did some of my own tracing of zoom level 19. And of course, you can see how it wasn't accurate. You might say to yourself, well, why don't I just retrace them myself? Why bother doing all these steps? The problem is if you get it a little bit off from the original, it'll re-download new imagery to cover what you've traced. And now you get some of that ugly looking imagery. So like here, you can see at Louisville, I had like this custom zoom level 19 sort of following the contours of the runways. Okay, cool. So now that it's all in there, I know I'm confirming that it's good. I'm just going to hit apply and save. I don't even think you need to do that step, but I just do anyway. Exit. And after that, you are good to go. Now I'm just going to hit all in one. Okay. And it's going to do its thing. There it goes. Sometimes, depending on, like I've changed it to the 1/3 arc second, and I've played around with the road flattening levels. If you start to basically improve these numbers, in other words, give it more detail, these steps will take longer period of time. One other thing to keep in mind is that sometimes these steps will sit for quite a while. And you might not even show you a progress bar initially, but eventually it does. There it goes. So that might take sometimes as long as 2 or 3 minutes, depending on the complexity of things you chose. Don't be discouraged. Just let it sit sometimes for even 5 or 7 minutes. It's doing its thing. All right, this is wrapping up step 2.5, and now it's taking the final step of building the DSFs, okay, with the imagery. The reason why I wanted to just pick up from here is because we're going to basically see that as it runs through the list, we're going to see that it says DDS already present. All right, so if we did everything right, it should say that the entire list down. If we made a mistake, we didn't do it correctly, then it might start to say downloading missing JPEG and then converting it. All right, so we're going to see that in just a moment. And then as it runs through the list, it will seemingly stop at one point, but the scroll bar will take over. You can see it's saying it's already present all the way through, which is great. Sometimes it has like an extra long line because sometimes the lines double up on each other for some reason. But as long as none of them say downloading any missing imagery, then we know we did it right. And then this is going to pretty much accelerate pretty quickly, and then the tile should be done. Okay, so now the tile is done with the conversion. Basically, this tile has been updated to version 1.30 with some of the parameters that I like in the new version. You can see this step took 2 minutes and 28 seconds. That normally would have taken about 20 to 40 minutes if it was downloading and converting new imagery. The other steps took actually more time than this one did. We can now go ahead and confirm a couple things. If we, first of all, we know we've converted because now we have all these extra files that are created. If we went to the textures, I should see my original views without those ugly in my opinion, ugly looking oversaturated images that are surrounding the populated city areas. I'll sort of zoom on down. You'll still always have the different lines of images that take place in whatever source you use. But let's go all the way to the bottom here so you can see this is a populated city area, and it looks like basically normal images as opposed to, let's pick one. So that looks like a normal satellite image and not an oversaturated one like we would have seen here, so this strange oversaturated pictures. The other thing you could do too, to verify that it was correct, which you don't have to, but just to show you, if it had downloaded new images, it would have put it in the ortho photos, and there's nothing in the ortho photos, so we ran this tile successfully without downloading new images. Great. So anyway, hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer, but I'm no expert. I just followed a series of steps that made it happen.